Scott Joplin lived here from what, 1901 to 1904. I think that kind of is hazy, and he wrote several of his most popular pieces here.
And someone had written on the house, Scott Joplin lived here, and when they in fact did research and looked through old directories, they did find that Scott Joplin had actually lived at this address. Eventually, the Neighborhood Housing Association, Jeff Vanderloo, gave it to the state to keep up as a state historic site.
Scott Joplin. It's really important to remember that Joplin is not really your typical ragtime composer. He did not want to be a ragtime composer. He wanted to be a classical musician, a classical composer. He wanted his bust up on the piano with Brahms and Beethoven and Mozart and those guys. And he is doing it now. He's the top. He's not average. He's the top, the great, the god, the king. Met people from all around the world right here at the Joplin House. And they said they came to St. Louis just to see the Joplin House. Apparently, the social gatherings in the late 19th century, black social gatherings, they're pretty poor. And so on Christmas or New Year's or weddings or something, they'd get dressed in their pretty much the same clothes that the poor Americans were wearing at the time. But since they were poor and black, they had that extra stigma. Ragtime became kind of a self-mocking expression among black Americans at those times because of that was their best clothes.
They're primarily African American, they're primarily male, but there are some whites, there are some women doing it. And that's one of the reasons why it's in the places where it's in, is because African Americans weren't allowed to play in some of the funner venues. And so you got these hot piano players playing in these, seedier places throughout the Midwest.
Even the African Americans of that time knew that in order to sell a song, they had to write it a certain way. So they wrote about what the white people thought about the African Americans, and they would sell songs. There was actually a lot of African American people would change their name and write as a white names because they couldn't get their music published.
Ragtime is a syncopated march. It's a style of music that started here in St. Louis in the black music clubs, traveled to the white side of town, to the white music clubs, and across the state and across the country and around the world. And that had never happened before. It was the first worldwide popular music craze.
It's part of our culture. It is the start of everything. Every music that you say is American, rock and roll, jazz, modern jazz, swing, all that stuff like that can all be traced back to the roots of ragtime. There is nothing that hasn't been done before except ragtime. It is the start.
The chapter of 200 years of American music, which I would say would be 200 years of white guys ripping off black guys' music, from Stephen Foster to Elvis Presley. If there's one focal point what's keeping ragtime alive today, and the heart of all these revivals, it's been Scott Joplin. His house that he lived in for maybe 6 months or a year, not long, it's just a boarding house, but it's still standing. And it's a focal point for ragtime in St. Louis and in the world. I say to a ragtime fan, the Joplin House is like Graceland is for an Elvis fan.
I don't know of any place other than Scott Joplin's house, and I would say that everyone should be here one time to experience it for themselves, because you just fall in love with it once you hear it live.
Music. I just really like his music and his house over there. I started looking at that, and sometimes I come down here and put out notes about it.
It's about the only place you can come that I know of and hear this kind of music in St. Louis.
The United States, and especially St. Louis, is keen on tearing down everything old and building new things, I think it's important to retain the architectural significance of the house, and also that what housing was like for just average Americans in the United States. And
it's kind of haunting when you play one of the rags that Joplin wrote here. You kind of have this weird feeling that, you know, that somebody's listening to you, namely Joplin.
It's just a place where you can put your hand down on something physical and say, well, Joplin touched this handrail in there. The walls, all the furniture is, you know, gone, but he walked on these floors. This room could be where the entertainer was first played.